At our company's anniversary gala, my sister stood up, tapped her glass, and announced like she was accepting an award. Mom and Dad are signing the CEO title to me. Molly gets nothing. The room erupted. Cheers. Whistles. Someone even yelled. About time. I didn't clap. I didn't blink. I just smiled the way you smile when a storm hits. But you already know the building is mine. Not yours. I set my fork down. Dad, I said softly. Should I tell them, or will you? His face drained. My sister froze. And in that moment, everyone knew something was coming. Before we see how this celebration turns into a crime scene, drop a comment, where are you listening from tonight? And what time is it for you? I want to see who is awake with me. The room didn't stop spinning. But my mind did. It went still. Cold. Analytical. I stood in the shadows of the ballroom, watching the scene unfold like a slow-motion car crash. The crystal chandeliers overhead cast a fractured light over 300 guests. Investors, suppliers, and local politicians. They were all clapping. They were all smiling. And they were all witnessing a crime. Even if they didn't know it yet. Chloe stood center stage. Beaming. She looked magnificent. I will give her that. She was wearing a silk gown that probably cost more than our junior accountant made in 3 months. She waved to the crowd, blowing kisses, soaking in the adoration like it was sunlight. She had no idea she was standing on a trapdoor. My parents, James and Angela, stood on either side of her, looking like the benevolent monarchs of a retail kingdom. They were good at this part. The show, the image. They had built Lumina boutiques on the concept of aspiration, selling an image of wealth that nobody could actually afford. Tonight, they were selling their own daughter. I took a sip of my sparkling water. It tasted metallic. For 5 years, I had been the invisible engine of this machine. While Chloe was traveling to Tulum and Paris to scout trends for her Instagram following, I was in the back office, negotiating with vendors who were threatening to cut off our supply. I was the one restructuring loans at 2 in the morning. I was the chief financial officer in everything but title. Because my father didn't believe in giving titles to the support staff. And now, they were promoting Chloe to anyone else. It looked like favoritism. It looked like the golden child finally getting the crown she had been promised since birth. But I knew better. I knew what the numbers looked like. This wasn't a promotion. It was a setup. In business theory, there is a concept called the glass cliff. It is when a company is failing, when the debt is insurmountable and the reputation is ruined. They bring in a woman to take the helm. They put a female face on the disaster so that when the ship finally goes down, they have someone to blame. They weren't giving Chloe a legacy. They were giving her a liability. I scanned the front row of the audience. That is where the real horror story was written. I saw Mr. Sterling, our lead investor. He was clapping enthusiastically. But his eyes weren't smiling. He knew. He had seen the quarterly reports I had sent him, the ones my father tried to hide. He knew the company was insolvent. Next to him was the regional supplier for our textiles. He was clapping too. He hadn't been paid in 90 days. This was the silence of the enablers. It made my stomach turn. These people, these wealthy, powerful men in their bespoke suits, they knew exactly what was happening. They knew my parents were fraudsters. They knew the business was a shell. But they weren't saying a word. They were clapping because they hoped that if the transition went smoothly, they might get pennies on the dollar before the bankruptcy court froze the assets. They were willing to watch a 25-year-old girl walk into federal prison just to protect their own margins. They were complicit. And in that moment, I realized I hated them almost as much as I hated my parents. My mother caught my eye from the stage. She gave me a tiny, sharp nod. It was a warning. Don't ruin this. Don't make a scene. Be the good. Quiet, Molly. I looked back at her. And I didn't nod. I didn't smile. I just checked the time on my phone. The audit was scheduled for Monday morning. They thought they had the weekend to bury the bodies. They were wrong. I turned away from the stage and walked toward the bar. I needed to remember exactly how we got here. I needed to remember the red ink. 6 months ago. I wasn't drinking sparkling water in a ballroom. I was sitting on the floor of my office at 3 a.m, surrounded by a different kind of paper trail. I had found it by accident. A vendor had emailed the wrong account. My personal one. Asking why their invoice from February hadn't been cleared. February. It was August. I started digging. I didn't just look at the books. I looked at the digital trash bins. I recovered, deleted emails. I cross-referenced shipping manifests with bank withdrawals. It took me 48 hours of non-stop forensic accounting to build the full picture. And when I finally saw it, I felt like the floor had dissolved. The company wasn't just struggling. It was hollow. My parents had been siphoning operating capital to fund their lifestyle for years. The vacations to the Amalfi Coast. The new luxury car for Chloe. The country club renovations. It wasn't profit. It was payroll tax. They hadn't paid federal payroll taxes in 18 months. I stared at the number on my screen until it burned into my retinas. $450,000. That was just the vendor liens. The tax liability was another beast entirely. And there was a letter from the IRS. Unopened and buried in my father's desk. Notifying us of an audit scheduled for the Monday after the anniversary gala. I remember walking into my father's office the next morning. I didn't sleep. I didn't shower. I just carried the red ink. James was sitting behind his mahogany desk, looking every inch the titan of industry. He smiled when I walked in. That practiced, camera-ready smile. Molly, he said. You look tired. You should take a page out of Chloe's book. She gets her beauty sleep. I slammed the file onto his desk. We are insolvent. Dad, I said. My voice didn't shake. We are $450,000 in debt to suppliers. And the IRS is coming for us in 6 months. If we don't liquidate assets now, today, we are going to prison. He didn't look at the file. He didn't even blink. He just picked up his coffee cup and took a slow, deliberate sip. You're being dramatic, he said. It's a cash flow issue. Every business has them. This isn't cash flow. This is fraud. You're using tax withholdings to pay for Chloe's engagement party. He stood up then. The smile vanished. He didn't look like a father anymore. He looked like a cornered animal deciding whether to bite. You're the CFO. Molly. Fix it. That's your job. You move the numbers around until they work. That is why we keep you around. I can't fix theft. Dad. I can't math my way out of federal crimes. He leaned over the desk, his voice dropping to a whisper that was colder than any shout. Then maybe you aren't as smart as we thought. Listen to me. You will fix this. And you will not say a word to your mother. And you will certainly not bore Chloe with this depressing math. She has a brand to build. Do not dim her light with your negativity. I stood there for a long moment. I realized then that I wasn't his partner. I wasn't his successor. I was the janitor. I was the one expected to clean up the blood so the golden child wouldn't stain her shoes. Fix it. Or you're out, he said, dismissing me with a wave of his hand. I walked out of his office. I didn't go back to my desk. I went to my car. I sat there and watched the building. The building I thought was my inheritance. He told me to fix it. So I did. Just not the way he expected. I pulled out my phone and called the only person in the family who hated James as much as I did. Aunt Sarah, I said when she answered. I have a business proposition. And you're going to want to hear this. That was the moment the daughter died. And the creditor was born. Now, standing in the ballroom 6 months later, watching Chloe laugh on stage, I felt a strange sense of peace. I had tried to save them. I had given them the warning. They had chosen to ignore the red ink. Now they were going to drown in it. I watched my mother weave through the crowd. Heading toward me, she had a document in her hand. The trap was set. Back in the ballroom, the applause was dying down. The air conditioning was humming, trying to scrub the heat of 300 bodies from the room. But it couldn't touch the suffocating pressure building in my chest. I saw them coming before they saw me. James and Angela moved through the crowd like sharks in a reef. Smooth. Predatory. Smiling at the little fish while they hunted. They broke away from the well-wishers and cornered me near the service entrance. There was no hello. There was no good to see you. James reached into his tuxedo jacket and pulled out a folded document. He didn't hand it to me. He pressed it against the high-top table between us, sliding a Montblanc pen on top of it. Sign it, he said. His voice was low. A rumble that used to terrify me when I was 6. Now, it just sounded like a bad negotiation tactic. I looked down. It wasn't a birthday card. It was a retroactive waiver of liability and a non-disclosure agreement. Backdated 3 years. What is this? I asked. Though I knew exactly what it was. It was a legal firewall. If I signed this, I was acknowledging that I had no decision-making power, no financial oversight, and no right to sue when the feds came knocking. It's protection, my mother said, stepping closer. She smelled like expensive perfume and desperation. For the family legacy. We can't have you throwing a tantrum and leaking sensitive information just because your feelings are hurt. My feelings aren't hurt. Mom, my professional ethics are. Stop it, she hissed. Her hand shot out, gripping my wrist. Her nails dug in. Stop acting like a martyr. You're jealous. You've always been jealous of Chloe because she has a natural sparkle that you just don't. You're trying to punish her because we chose her. I looked at her hand on my wrist. I looked at her eyes. And suddenly, the equation solved itself. For years, I had wondered why they did it. Why did they pamper Chloe? Why did they give her the credit? The clothes. The love. I thought it was because they loved her more. But looking at them now, trying to force me to sign a document that would essentially frame their beloved daughter for tax fraud, I realized I had the math wrong. This is the narcissist's calculation. To a narcissist, a child isn't a person. We are extensions. I was the extension that did the work. The hand. The tool. Chloe was the extension that garnered the praise. The face. The trophy. But when the body is dying, when gangrene sets in, you don't cut off the tool. You cut off the limb that's attracting the most attention to save the head. They weren't sacrificing Chloe because they loved her less. They were sacrificing her because she was useful in a way I wasn't. She was vain enough to take the title without reading the contract. She was naive enough to believe she deserved it. I was too smart to be the patsy. So I had to be the enemy. It wasn't love. It was just logistics. They loved themselves so much that they were willing to feed their golden child to the wolves just to buy themselves a few more months of freedom. I'm not jealous. Angela, I said, pulling my wrist free. I'm horrified. James tapped the paper with his index finger. Sign the damn paper. Molly. Or you are out of this family. No inheritance. No contact. You will be a stranger to us. A stranger. I repeated. I looked over James's shoulder. On the stage. Chloe was laughing. Holding up a glass of champagne. Toasting to a future she didn't know was already foreclosed. You're right. I said. I can't be part of this family anymore. Good. James said, uncapping the pen. Then sign. I picked up the pen. I held it for a second, feeling the weight of it. Then I dropped it into the waiter's tray of half-empty glasses passing by. No. James's face turned a violent shade of purple. What did you say to me? I said no. I'm not signing your waiver. Dad. And I'm not signing your death warrant for Chloe. I reached into my clutch. My fingers brushed against the cool, crisp paper of the document I had brought. It wasn't an NDA. It was something much more permanent. You wanted a show, I said, stepping around them. You wanted everyone to know who is in charge. Let's tell them. I walked toward the stage. My mother grabbed at my dress. But I was already out of reach. The hum of the room seemed to drop away. All I could hear was the click of my heels on the marble floor, counting down the seconds until impact. Chloe was mid-sentence when I stepped into the spotlight. I just want to say, she gushed, clutching the microphone like a beauty pageant trophy, that I am so honored to carry the family legacy forward. Lumina isn't just a brand. It's a promise. It's a crime scene, I said. I didn't shout. I didn't have to. I just walked up the stairs to the stage, took the spare microphone from the podium stand, and spoke with the flat, a bored authority of a flight attendant, announcing a delay. The room went dead silent. Chloe spun around, her eyes wide. She looked like a deer caught in the headlights of a semi-truck. Molly, she whispered. What are you doing? You're ruining my moment. I'm saving your life. Chloe, I said, though I doubt you'll thank me for it. From the floor, I heard my father roar. Cut the mic, security, get her off the stage. But the sound guy didn't cut the mic. I'd spent 5 years approving his invoices and making sure he got paid on time when my father tried to stiff him. He liked me. He hated James. He just leaned back in his booth and crossed his arms. I turned to the crowd. 300 faces staring back at me. I saw the investors. I saw the suppliers. I saw Zachary, Chloe's fiancé, holding a glass of champagne that was suddenly frozen halfway to his mouth. My father wants you to believe this is a transition of power, I said. It's not. It's a transfer of liability. James was scrambling up the side stairs now, his face a mask of panic. She's lying. She's having a breakdown. I didn't look at him. I looked at my sister, Chloe. I said, before you sign that contract, I have one question for the new CEO. Do you know about the federal audit scheduled for 9 a.m. Monday morning? Chloe blinked. What audit? The one regarding the $450,000 in unpaid vendor liens. The one regarding the 18 months of payroll tax fraud. I reached into my clutch and pulled out a flash drive. I plugged it into the presentation laptop sitting on the podium. The massive screen behind us flickered. The slide showing a montage of Chloe's best outfits vanished. In its place, a spreadsheet appeared. It was ugly. It was undeniable. Rows and rows of red ink. The projected balance sheet loomed over the ballroom like a scoreboard for a losing game. This is the company you are inheriting, I told the room. Technically insolvent. Legally compromised. The gift my parents are giving Chloe tonight isn't equity. It is personal liability for tax evasion. I pointed to the bottom line on the screen. That isn't profit. That is the amount the IRS is going to seize next week. I turned to my parents, who had frozen at the edge of the stage. My mother looked like she was going to faint. My father looked like he wanted to kill me. You picked her because she looks the part, I said, my voice echoing off the vaulted ceiling. You thought, because she never reads the contracts, she wouldn't notice you were framing her. But you forgot something. I read everything. I looked back at the crowd. Merit matters, I said. You can wear the crown. But if you can't do the math, you're just a girl, waiting to be arrested. I pulled the flash drive out. The screen went black. Happy anniversary, I said. I dropped the microphone. It hit the floor with a heavy thud that sounded exactly like a gavel coming down. You're fired. My father's scream tore through the silence of the ballroom. He was shaking, his face a mottled red mask of fury. He pointed a trembling finger at me, looking less like a CEO and more like a dictator whose statue was being toppled. You are fired. Molly, you have no authority here. You are nothing. Security. Remove her from this building immediately. The security guards. 2 large men, I had hired myself 3 years ago, didn't move. They looked from my father's erratic waving to me, standing calm at the podium. They knew who signed the checks. They stayed put. You can't fire me, Dad, I said, my voice amplified and clear. I resigned this morning. My letter is on your desk, right next to the IRS notification you refused to open. Then get out, my mother shrieked. She had abandoned her elegance entirely. Get out of our building. You are trying to destroy this family because you are bitter and small. This is our company. This is our building. I laughed. It wasn't a nice sound. It was the sound of a trap snapping shut. Your company, yes. Technically, you still own the brand, though the feds will have custody of it by Tuesday. I stepped down from the podium. The crowd parted for me, creating a wide berth. Like I was radioactive. I walked toward my parents until I was standing toe-to-toe with James. But you're wrong about one thing. Dad, this isn't your building. I reached into my clutch one last time. 6 months ago, when you told me to fix it or get out. I realized something. You were never going to pay your vendors. You were never going to pay your taxes. And you were certainly never going to pay your rent. I pulled out a folded legal document. It wasn't a spreadsheet this time. It was a deed. I formed a holding company in August, I said, keeping my voice low enough that only the front row could hear, but loud enough to shatter him, with a little help from a silent partner who knows exactly what you are. I looked over at the corner table. Aunt Sarah raised her champagne glass in a silent toast. I bought the building. Dad, I bought the mortgage from the commercial lender when you defaulted in July. You were too busy planning this party to notice the bank notices. So I intercepted them. I paid off the arrears with my savings and Sarah's investment. I slapped the document into his chest. He grabbed it reflexively. I'm not your CFO anymore, I said. I'm your landlord. James stared at the paper. His hands were shaking so hard the paper rattled. And Lumina Boutiques is 4 months behind on rent. I continued. I've been lenient because of family obligations. But since I'm nothing to you now, I'm calling in the debt. You can't do this, Angela whispered. We have rights. You have a lease violation. That document in your hand isn't a lease renewal. It's an eviction notice. You have 72 hours to vacate the premises before I change the locks and seize the inventory to cover back rent. The reality hit them like a physical blow. They weren't just broke. They were homeless. They were standing in a kingdom they didn't own, celebrating a legacy that had just been repossessed. Molly. Please. My mother said, her voice cracking. She reached for my arm. The anger suddenly replaced by a terrifying, desperate fragility. We can fix this. We can talk about this. No. I said, stepping back. We can't. The time to talk was 6 months ago. The time to talk was when you decided to frame Chloe for your crimes. I looked at my sister. Chloe was standing frozen, clutching the contract she almost signed. She looked at our parents. Then at the screen still displaying the debt. Then at me. Then she looked at Zachary. Her fiancé was standing 5 feet away. He was a venture capitalist. He understood numbers. He understood liability. And as he looked at the eviction notice in my father's hand and the red ink on the screen, I saw the calculation happen in real time behind his eyes. Zach, Chloe whispered. She reached a hand out to him. Zachary didn't take it. He took a half step back. I can't be involved in this, he stammered. My firm. We have compliance standards. If there's a federal investigation. Zachary. We're getting married, Chloe said, her voice rising in panic. I think we need to pause, he said. He wasn't looking at her anymore. He was looking at the exit signs. I need to call my lawyer. He turned and walked away. He walked fast. Chloe watched him go. The color drained from her face. She looked down at the CEO contract in her hand. The paper crown that had cost her everything. She let it drop to the floor. You promised, she whispered to our parents. You said I was the face of the future. You are, I said softly. Just not the future they planned. I turned my back on them. The gala was over. The autopsy had begun. The chaos that followed wasn't loud. It was the frantic, murmuring buzz of a hive that had just been kicked over. The investors didn't scream. They moved. Mr. Sterling was the first to the stage. His face pale, demanding to see the books immediately. The suppliers were pulling out their phones, calling their legal teams to file liens before the sun came up. My parents were in the center of the storm, shrinking. James was trying to shout over the questions, trying to maintain the illusion of control. But nobody was listening to him anymore. He looked small. Without the podium. Without the lighting. Without the lie. He was just a man in a rented tuxedo with a lot of debt. I looked at Chloe. She was sitting on the edge of the stage. Her expensive gown pooled around her like a deflated parachute. She wasn't crying about the business. She wasn't crying about Zachary. She was staring at our mother with a look of absolute betrayal. You knew, I heard her whisper. You knew I'd go to jail. Angela reached for her. But Chloe flinched away. That was the end of the golden child. The pedestal had shattered. And she was finally seeing the ground for the first time. I felt a pull to go to her, to help her up, but I stopped myself. I had already saved her from prison. I couldn't save her from the truth. She had to walk through that wreckage herself. I turned away. Walking through the crowd felt like parting the Red Sea. People stared at me. Some with fear. Some with respect. Most with the realization that they had bet on the wrong horse. I didn't stop to gloat. I didn't stop to explain. I walked out the double doors, past the security guards, and into the cool night air. The silence outside was heavy and sweet. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with oxygen that didn't smell like desperation and expensive perfume. A black sedan was waiting at the curb. The window rolled down. Aunt Sarah looked out, her face illuminated by the dashboard lights. She smiled. A satisfied curve of the lips. Did they sign? She asked. No, I said, opening the passenger door. But they know who owns the building. Good enough, she said. Get in. We have a company to build. I slid into the seat. As we pulled away, I looked back at the venue one last time. I watched the lights of the ballroom recede into the distance. People think revenge is about destruction. They think it's about burning the house down with everyone inside. But that's messy. That's emotional. Real revenge is the walk away. It's understanding that you don't need to light the match. You just have to stop being the one holding the roof up. You have to remove your labor, your intelligence, and your protection, and let gravity do the rest. I wasn't inheriting a broken kingdom. I was building my own. My phone buzzed in my lap. I looked down. It was a notification from a headhunter I'd been speaking with for months. A competitor who valued clean books and brutal honesty. Contract ready. When can you start? I typed back 2 words, tomorrow morning. Then I opened my messages. I found the family group chat. The one filled with pictures of Chloe. Demands from my father. And guilt trips from my mother. I didn't archive it. I didn't mute it. I pressed delete. If you've ever had to walk away to save yourself, leave a fire emoji in the comments. And if you believe that merit should always matter more than blood, share this story. You never know who needs to hear it. The grammar has been corrected, and the numbers have been converted into words.